So I think it's really important just to, like everybody said, get government out of the way. There's a really interesting point to be made. I think Jacob mentioned central planning. And this is a small example. If you go to a doctor for the smallest thing, right? Like let's say you go to a doctor for a headache or a runny nose, they're going to ask you a million questions. What's your medical history? Are you taking any prescribed medications? Do you have any problems with diabetes or heart disease, or you know, what's your weight? What's your height? Everything. They want to know everything about you. And somehow, because those are all relevant, right? They might be like, oh, well, we need to give you this medication. Oh, but it says here, according to this, that's going to be really bad for you. These are really important things. But when the government comes along and says, oh, well, we're going to prescribe something for the entire country of 320 million people, are they doing that full health check on 320 million people? No, they're going to come and prescribe something for 320 million people. Is that a mandatory vaccination? Maybe. Is that shutting down your business and forcing you to figure out some way to survive without any income? Maybe. But they don't really care, because to them, well, they're not living in those situations. They're not greatly affected by it. Of course, they still have their income. You'll notice as many businesses they shut down, they might have shut down the tax prep businesses, but they haven't shut down the tax collection agencies that are still destroying this country. So like I said before, go back to the American dream. We should all own property. We should not be worried about paying rent and paying taxes, because that is what forces us all into debt and forces us to become dependent upon their economy, which is to their vision, centrally planned. We need to be able to make our own decisions and choices. I think really before we address education and what to do with it, we have to ask the question, why do we need education? Because a lot of people, they need education because it's going to get you a better job. It's going to get you more money. If that's really what it's about, then okay, I could see that. But there are so many other ways to make a lot of money without going to school. I make a lot of money with my career, and I didn't learn any of it in school. I self-taught. Now, I know not every industry is like that, but that's a thing. Now, here's the other thing though. If we're just doing this for jobs, we have to really ask, well, why are we working? Right? I mean, we're being threatened that all of these jobs are going to be replaced by automation, right? Is it really necessary for us to be all doctors and lawyers? And I mean, if we got rid of all these restrictions and ridiculous government regulations, we wouldn't even need so many lawyers. But there's all these things out there that, you know, we really don't need. What is I mean, shit, we could go into what is the purpose of life, right? Is it so you can work all day, 40 hours a week, so that you can have enough money to pay your rent and then go home and see your family for a couple hours and that's it, wake up, do it again? No, that's so pointless. And the fact that we have so much automation, so much that's replacing all these factory jobs and everything, what people don't understand is that should mean that we're working less. We should be working fewer hours and retiring younger. So what are we going to school for? I mean, I get it. Going to school to educate yourself, to learn about things because you want to create and invent and take humanity to the next level. That's an amazing thing. You can do that at the library where they have the same books for a fraction of the price. You can do it on the internet for even less than that. Why are we so addicted to this thing called education? Because everyone's been telling us that that's the only way to survive in life. And who propagates that? The government. When they say, you have a kid, he has to go to school. If he doesn't go to school, we can arrest you. And when he's in school, we're going to tell him things like, if you don't graduate high school, you're going to be a loser. If you don't get your college
10
degree,
seconds.
you're going to be a loser. So, yeah, we need to stop doing that. Government is creating all these problems. We need to completely get rid of the FDA. Did you know that there's only 3 manufacturers of insulin that are allowed to sell in the United States, but there's 47 worldwide. You go to other countries where more can sell and it's much cheaper. So there's a company in the United States that manufactures insulin, and they'll sell it here in the United States for $100. They'll also sell that same exact quantity in Mexico for $12. But guess what? You can't go to Mexico and bring it back with you because that's illegal. You can't order it and have it shipped across the borders. Why not? Well, because they know that they can get $100 from Americans, but not from Mexicans. So the only way they can keep that price up and keep people from competing with lower prices is by locking down the borders and saying, well, you can't import drugs from other countries, even though they came from this country. That's how they do it. Here's another one. I've got a friend in Idaho who lives in a small town, and there were some investors who wanted to build a new hospital What's wrong with that? A new hospital, more beds, more competition, lower prices, and especially during this COVID crisis, wow, all we're doing is complaining about how we don't have the healthcare capacity because there's not enough hospital beds. Well, the government there said, oh, you want to build a new hospital? Well, you need to have a certificate of need. What does that mean? Well, you need to prove to us that we need another hospital. And even though it's your money that you're going to lose if your hospital fails because you have no customers, you have to prove to us that we need it just so you can build it. This is what the government does. They are literally choking us with denying our access to healthcare. They're literally strangling us to death by saying you can't have medication, you can't have access to doctors, you can't have access to healthcare. There are doctors in this country from all over the world that are more than qualified. In fact, they're probably better qualified than half the doctors we have in this country, but they're not allowed to work. Why? Government regulation. We got to get rid of all that nonsense. We have to allow people to actually do work. When people are ready, they're there and they're able to help people. We need to let them, we need to allow them to be able to do that. So I think everyone's going to say the same thing. So I'm going to go a little bit off the wire with this one. I want to point out some things. A lot of people think illegal immigrants are going to come here and go there and take advantage of our tax system. They're going to send their kids to American schools, which Americans are paying tax for. Well, American schools are paid for with property tax, and those, whether they're legal or not, immigrants are living somewhere. If they're renting, they're paying property tax. They're paying their landlord's property tax. If they buy a house, they're paying property tax. They're also helping to increase the market value of homes because the more occupancy you have, the higher the value. That's a pretty big contribution. They're not stealing from that. There are all these other objections. And what I want to challenge anyone who has an objection to any type of migration at any point. And by the way, I want to say this, I've been down here for most of the last couple of years and I haven't seen a single rapist or murderer, just throwing that out there. But I want to challenge you to think like this. Take any reason that you're afraid of an immigrant coming from Mexico or China or anywhere else and apply that to somebody from the state next to your state, because it's another geography. People could go from one state to your state and take your jobs. They could go from one state where they've been paying taxes and now in your tax, they can take advantage of programs that are in your state. All of these programs are very real, but the immigration is not the problem. These programs are the problem. And that's where we need to be looking. Why do we have these programs in the first place? Why do we depend on them? And I'm going to go back to the American dream, the new American dream, where we really shouldn't. We should have sustainable lives where we don't depend on government or any of its social safety net programs. We should be our own safety nets. The best place to start is we have to change the culture in this country to understand that a lot of the things that we consider crimes are not crimes. I mean, we have people right now who think it's a crime to go outside of your house without wearing a mask or to leave your house twice in one day. They're calling the police over this. It's absolutely insane. And they do this because someone on TV who works for the government said, yeah, we're going to create this new policy. Sometimes it's not even law. It's just there, but they're using this as excuses to call police. So police can come and extort money from us. We need transparency. There's no way if a police officer or a prosecutor or somebody working for the government does something illegal that harms an American, what can you do? You can sue them civilly and you have a very slim chance, but can you start a criminal prosecution against them? No, that's only something the government can do. And we've seen this entire history of the government not prosecuting their own. We need a fix for that. I've got the Accountable Authority Act, which I proposed when I was running for the Texas House in 2014. It's got a lot of solutions for that. You can check that out. It's got a lot more information in it, but we need to level the playing field. Right now, they have all the power, and we're helpless because we're just going to let them have it? No, we need the courage to stand up to that. We need to fight back. Wonderful. I've been asked this a couple times. I want to tell a little joke. In the United States, every year, Americans earn $8.5 trillion. That's a lot of money. $8.5 trillion. Also, every year, the government, the federal, state, and local governments, through all of their tax programs, will collect from us $7.5 trillion. That's kind of a lot, right? This is where it gets funny. In printed circulation, US currency, there is $3.5 trillion. So even though we're making a lot of money that's circulating around the economy, the government extracts from us twice, more than twice, the actual money in existence. They say this is necessary. Now, Joe brought up a really good point. If they weren't stealing all this money from us, what would we buy? Well, everyone complains that the rent is too damn high. What if we own homes? We would all be able to pay for our homes cash if the government weren't stealing all this money from us, just from our income tax. Then, of course, there's property tax, which makes our rent even higher. 40 to 60% of our rent, if you're renting an apartment, goes to property tax. How would you like to cut your rent in half? How would you like to double your paycheck by getting rid of all the taxes associated with it? This is the reality of what we can do by getting rid of taxes. And people say, oh, but what about, the government services that they actually provide? Well, 99% of what the government takes from us is absolutely wasted on no big contracts, overpaying for everything, foreign wars and everything else. That money's just going in the can, or it's going into some politician's cousin's pocket. We need to stop that.
From Nick Ditello, explain your views on Second Amendment rights. And he would like you to address the NFA, the ATF, and unconstitutional red flag laws.
Sure. So all gun laws are unconstitutional. I think that's pretty clear in the Second Amendment. It says shall not be infringed, and fringes are kind of like the little edges of things. I mean, an encroachment would be if you stepped on the thing, but infringement means slowly pulling strings away from the sides of it. We need to repeal the NFA. We need to get rid of the ATF. But hey, if the government needs a source of income, maybe we can turn it into a museum, or maybe it's a convenience store. Yeah, we need to get rid of all these laws, and we need to give America their freedom back. I've been to a lot of countries around the world. I know people in a lot of countries that I haven't been to, and I've seen their fights and their protests. And I've seen unarmed Americans at their protests, and they get sprayed with fire hoses and they get assaulted by the police. But I've seen protests in the United States where Americans go there peacefully and armed, and the police do nothing because they're not ready to start a civil war. That's really what the Second Amendment is about. It's not about starting a war with the United States government. It's about saying we're not even going to go there. We don't need to go there because, a government should be afraid of its people. The people should not be afraid of its government. They work for us.
Ivan Yer says it doesn't matter if taxes are immoral or should be illegal. It's acceptable now. How are you going to transition into a new system?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. And we have a lot of people who think that we absolutely need taxes to keep society moving, and we need to change that mentality. We absolutely need to change that mentality, because a lot of people will even say now that the income tax is illegally collected, and I agree with that. But as long as most of society says, well, this is acceptable because this is what we need, they're going to accept it. It doesn't matter if you show them that you don't have to pay it. People are going to think that they have to pay it. So we need to get off of that. And that's what the new American dream is all about. It's getting people back into property, so they own property. It's getting people off of dependence on the social nets, getting people off of dependence in Social Security and all these welfare programs. Because when people are not dependent on that, they have so much more, and they can realize that, hey, I don't need to work so hard. I don't need two jobs. One adult can go to work while the other parent stays home and teaches the kids and homeschools. There's so many options that become available, and we have so much money. So it's not a question of, well, who's going to pay for the schools, because it's, you're going to have so many options. Oh, we can just pay cash and just pick the best school that we like. That's, the closest, the best, whatever you want. You get that choice back. And once people start to understand that, then you can start saying, well, why am I paying all this money in taxes if I'm going to pay for the better school anyway, which is already more affordable? So we do need to fundamentally change the mindset of what taxes are about in order to get there. And that's something that we are working on very hard, and we're making a lot of progress with it.